We're still monitoring right now. Right here on 8th floor, ladies and gentlemen. And we just been invited to a medical journal coverage, medical journal of Therapeutics Africa, and the Institute for Medical Writing, Health and Life Science professional degrees, include a BSc, MSc, PhD, medical, learn regulatory documentation, medical writing, job skills. She's the right one, the right there standing, the lady. Basically, you know, she got involved in analysis and presentation of health data to general professional audiences. In articles, posters, PowerPoint, and audience video capacities. So that's what it is right now. So guests are still coming in, trickling in, so we're monitoring from here on 8th floor. People are coming in little by little. Alright, so we'll be watching this closely. Ladies and gentlemen, Republic Reporters here in New York City. Thank you.
Okay, nice to meet you.
What column? Okay, that's you.
Do you have a card?
So people have this annually, or
We want
just started.
We just started.
So this new?
Yes.
On the calendar.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And we want to do like every 2 years.
Okay.
Just 2 different topics that are related to.
Okay. And that's this.
Yeah. And also, if you have any ideas, like what topic you
Okay.
think is worth it to talk about, that's what we want. We definitely
just
need your help.
on criminal cases or just anything on the continent? Like
Criminal cases on Manhattan.
On Manhattan? I have an inside Manhattan.
No, we
We need
don't.
inside Manhattan.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me, we have some of them. Some of the people that just walk in. Yeah.
Just give me the sign.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Hidalin Colon. She communicated to us a time ago. That's how I understand. We are monitoring, so let's see what happens. Right.
Okay.
Welcome everybody.
We're kicking off.
Now also with the chief of the DA, so he will give the welcome, okay?
All right.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. The chief of the DA is the DA himself, the district attorney. I am the chief assistant district attorney. All of us are assistant district attorneys in the entire office except Mr. Vance. He's the district attorney. I'm the chief assistant. On his behalf, I welcome all of you to come here today. I really appreciate. He really appreciates your coming to talk to us today. We're gonna have some very experienced experts talk to you about how the criminal justice system works here in Manhattan, New York County, and more importantly, you're going to hear a little bit more about the very serious problem of domestic violence and what role you can play in helping us educate the public and your communities about that issue. Our main objective is to continue to foster the relationship that we have built with the African community. Some of you may already be familiar with our office from the program that we held in mid-October relating to immigration fraud and prevention up at the Harlem office building on 125th Street. We also, I'm sure that most if not all of you know our community affairs coordinator, Famoud Kone, who is in the back there, and he is responsible for a lot of our outreach here in Manhattan under the direction of our community affairs coordinator, Lee Ambelis, who's in the back there raising her hand. If you haven't gotten them already, at the door there are folders full of useful information that we hope that you will use in reporting and in whatever outreach you're able to do. It includes phone numbers, hotlines, things like that, which I think are very important for all the various communities in Manhattan to be aware of. You're very fortunate today. You're going to hear from somebody I call the great Audrey Moore, who is the Special Victims Bureau Chief of the Manhattan DA's office. She's a more than 20-year veteran of the Manhattan DA's office, and is in charge of the Special Victims Bureau, which is it's a creation of DA Vance where he consolidated some existing programs, all of which are very important to the various problems of special victims in Manhattan. They are sex crimes, domestic violence, child abuse, and elder abuse. And those are all under Audrey's expert leadership, and you're going to hear from her. You're also going to hear from another 20-year veteran, Deputy Bureau Chief Janine Lanay, who is going to talk to you as well, and also you'll hear from Beverly Gilchrist of our Witness Aid Services Unit. We believe here in Manhattan, the message that we hope that you will leave here with is that crime victims should not suffer in fear or in silence. We need you, we need everybody to help get the word out in Manhattan that the DA's office is a safe place to report crime, no matter the immigration status of the victim or his or her family. That's a very important point. It is a matter of policy for us, and if you have questions about that, please reach out to any of the folks in this room, and we'll be happy to talk more about it. I would like to introduce you now to Audrey Moore. She's not just a 20-year veteran, not just a Special Victims Bureau Chief. She's highly decorated. She's won all sorts of awards. She's well known to the victim advocacy community, and we are fortunate to have her talk to you today. Thank you for the privilege of addressing you, and I'll hand it over to Audrey Moore.
Good morning, I should say good afternoon. I'm just going to keep it very brief so we can get to the crux of our discussion today about domestic violence. But as the DA, I should say as Chief Assistant Dan Alonso has stated, domestic violence is very important to our office, and it's very important that people feel like they can come to the District Attorney's office and talk to people about their issues as it relates to domestic violence. Our assistants handle these cases and take these cases very, very seriously and are very well trained in the handling of domestic violence cases. And one of the things that this DA has done, he's been very committed to victims, particularly of crime, particularly of vulnerable victims of crime. He created the Special Victims Bureau approximately a year ago because he thought we needed to really cohesively address the victims of domestic violence, child abuse, elder abuse, and sex abuse, because so many of those problems are overlapping in these particular areas. You know, when you see child abuse cases, we sometimes see domestic violence cases. Where there are domestic violence cases, we see child abuse cases. And we also see sexual abuse, domestic violence cases. So it gives us the ability, having a Special Victims Bureau, to have a cohesive plan in terms of how we deal with those cases. One of the things I should say that the DA is really working towards is having a Family Justice Center here in Manhattan. And the purpose of the Family Justice Center, to some extent, is to kind of have a one-stop shopping. On one side of it will be the DA's office side, the criminal justice side, which will host the Special Victims Bureau. And on the other side will be the civil side, and they'll have civil legal attorneys. There will be social service programs there that will be able to help victims of domestic violence. They'll be able to come see the DA and then address their other issues that they have in terms of moving forward and having a life that's not filled with violence. To move on, I would like to turn this over now to Janine Lanay. Janine Lanay is the deputy of the Domestic Violence Unit. We started out at the same time, and she's going to talk to you a little bit today about the process, the criminal justice process, and how we handle cases, and then more specifically about how we handle domestic violence cases. Thank you.
Bienvenue. Before I start, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself as well. I stand before you not only as an assistant DA, but also as a first-generation children of immigrants. Both my mother and father emigrated here. My mother emigrated from Haiti, so I am somewhat familiar with the situation of the immigrant community and some of the challenges that are unique to the immigrant community. So I am one of the Deputy Bureau Chiefs in domestic violence, and I have been here in this office since 1989. And I've handled a wide variety of cases from assaults to homicides. And one thing that I have noticed in my years here is the pervasiveness of domestic violence. It is an extremely serious crime, and it is a crime that crosses all social and economic barriers. It has impacted all of the communities in our great city. There are very disturbing statistics about domestic violence across the country. Domestic violence is a greater cause of physical injury than rape, assault, and car accidents combined. Medical professionals have called the epidemic of domestic violence a healthcare issue for women. Yearly, on average, more than 30,000 women go to the emergency room because of an act of domestic violence, and those are the ones that seek help. We know that a far greater number do not seek help, and often we discover that there's domestic violence when they go for other health-related issues that are related to the domestic violence, and the doctor examining them discovers that there are old injuries or the pneumonia as a result of a broken rib that has led to an infection, which has led to pneumonia, which is why the person comes because they're too ashamed or too embarrassed or too fearful to talk about what's really going on in the home. In New York City here, the New York City Police Department responded in 2010 to 249,440 incidents of domestic violence. So on average, 680 times a day, a police officer went to a home because there was a problem in the home that got so out of control that the only way that people thought they could bring it back under control was to call the police. In this office last year, we managed approximately 5,600 domestic violence cases, and in 2010, we unfortunately saw in the city a 5% increase in the total number of cases. A truly disturbing statistic is of the 75 family-related homicides in 2010, where the victim was killed by the abuser, 77% of those cases had no known prior police contact. They never went for help. 96% of those cases, there were no orders of protection. So we know that it affects everyone, and we've also seen it in the African community. I'd like to start our talk with a short definition of what domestic violence is, so that we can all sort of be on the same page. Domestic violence is a behavior that one person in an intimate relationship uses to control another person. So what can they use to control another person? They can use physical abuse, emotional or sexual abuse. They can use financial control. They can use abusive language. The thing that you should bear in mind is that domestic violence does not happen all of a sudden. A person doesn't wake up one morning and decide that they're going to kill their spouse. Usually it's a process. It happens slowly, gradually. Little things like telling a person how they can dress, or who they can or cannot speak to, or whether or not they can have a cell phone that day to communicate. It escalates until the acceptable method of controlling the victim is to use violence. These acts tear our families apart. They tear our communities apart. They pit neighbor against neighbor and family member against family member. They are they damage the structure of our community and our society. Many people ask, well, why do the women stay? But there are many barriers to women coming forward and reporting. And women in the African community as well, or victims in the African community as well. We know that language barriers are a problem. If the person doesn't speak the language of the country, or if they feel that the police that are responding don't understand them, they may be hesitant to call. For that reason, the police department has interpreters on staff and has recruited individuals that speak many different languages. People are concerned that if they report crimes, their immigration status could be affected. Here in the DA's office, we do not ask about a victim's immigration status. People should be aware that if they report an incident of domestic violence, they will not be turned into immigration. If you are the victim of a crime, you can access services. You can go to a hospital, you can see a district attorney, you can call the police. You will not be deported as a result of reporting that crime. Many people from other countries fear or mistrust the police and the government in this country. They just don't know this government system well enough. They perhaps have had bad experiences themselves in the past, and this mistrust affects their ability to call for help. We also know that there are people that feel there is a cultural resistance to involving outsiders into what is a private family matter. People feel that if it's something going on within the family, it should be kept within the family, it should be resolved within the family, and that the introduction of an outsider into what is a private issue is not a good thing to do. We know that this strategy is not successful often. Other people are concerned that they may be ostracized in their community, that families and friends may think less of them, or may side with the abuser instead of them. They may be reluctant to harm the family unit. They may be financially dependent upon the person who is perpetuating the domestic violence and may have nowhere else to go if they turn to the person who is doing that. These are some of the obstacles that prevent people from coming forward and saying what's going on in their families and reaching out for help. Because we're aware of this, we're trying to find ways to overcome these barriers. And in our outreach to you, we hope to give you some information as well so that you can go back to the communities so that we can air this problem and not keep it inside the family unit where damage is being done, and involve the community and reach out to help people who might actually be able to come to a different conclusion or a different outcome than the one that they'll go into if they're just dealing with it by themselves. So one of the things that we do besides conversation, besides having discussions, besides having forums like this, is we go into the community. We go to see children in the school setting, and we talk to them about what a healthy relationship looks like, what a healthy teen relationship looks like. We know that, unfortunately, many people who grow up in a domestic violence situation will grow up to either become victims themselves or abusers themselves. So it's important to reach children while they're young, and while they're forming their own relationships, their own early relationships, to talk to them about domestic violence, how to relate to one another, how to have a healthy relationship. What is good behavior, and what is behavior that will be not so helpful in terms of making the relationship work and making the family unit work. We know that if we go out to community groups and we talk to community groups, we can give you tools to talk about this issue and to perhaps diffuse some situations that are currently going on. In the DA's office here, we have assistants who speak more than one language like myself, and interpreters on standby all the time. So if there is a person who is the victim of a crime, and they come into the DA's office, we will call an interpreter if we don't speak the language, and the interpreter will help interpret. If the crime happens after hours and an interpreter is not available, we have access to interpreter services by telephone. So we have people here on staff, if someone comes, to talk about the issue of domestic violence that can interpret the language. If a person is not here legally, I cannot stress this hard enough, we do not report individuals to immigration. We do not do that. If you come and you are not documented or your status is not here legally, we can help a person apply for what is called a U visa. And U visas are an instrument that we can use to help a person remain in this country while cases is pending and perhaps even after that. And what we can do is talk to you a little bit about the process, so it's less of a mystery if people have more information with which to make decisions. So let me talk to you a little bit about what happens when a person is arrested. Okay? Let us assume that the police are called to a house and an arrest is made. Many people don't know what happens after an arrest is made, or what happens to the individual charged, or what happens to the victim of the case. So when a police officer thinks that there's a crime that's been committed, they take the defendant and they bring them here to the DA's office. And there they have a conference with an assistant DA. That will be the assistant DA that remains for the case throughout the life of the case. So the first attorney that you meet, the first assistant district attorney, will be the assistant district attorney who will remain for the entire case. So if there are violations again, they will know that family, know those individuals, and be able to deal with the situation. So the ADA will discuss with the police officer the facts that led to the arrest. If everyone agrees that the behavior that has been committed constitutes a crime, then the individual will be charged with the crime. At that time, that is when the first step is made to reach out to the person who is the victim of the crime. There will be a call from the DA's office introducing the assistant DA who is assigned to the case, giving them the telephone number and their names and a means of reaching them. And an appointment will be set up for the victim to come and speak to the DA assigned. After that, the case is drawn up, and the case is assigned a docket number, which is a tracking number which is used for the matter. And the individual who was arrested, we'll now refer to him as the defendant, is brought before an arraignment judge, and he is formally told, or she is formally told, what the charges are against them. At that point in time, an attorney is assigned to the person, to the defendant, and a discussion of whether or not bail will be set is had at that point in time. If bail is set, then if the person can make it, they will be released from prison, and if they are not, if they can make the bail, they will post the bail, and they will be released with a promise to come back. In many cases, if the person is a first arrest, the first time they have contact with the police system, with the criminal justice system, or if the case is not a very serious case, if it is a minor case, the person will not have any bail set and will be released upon their own recognizance. And what that means is they promise to come back. And if they do not come back, they will go and get them, but they promise to come back to the next court date. The case is then adjourned from there. Arraignments generally take place within 24 hours of arrest. Upon arraignment, what is normally called an order of protection is also issued. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this instrument, but an order of protection is an order by a judge which tells the defendant what kind of contact he can have with the victim of the crime. So the defendant is advised at that point in time whether or not he can call, whether or not he can visit, whether he can go to the person's home or not. There are full orders of protection and limited orders of protection. The limited orders of protection allow greater contact between the parties. The order of protection is put on a piece of paper, and that paper is then entered into the police information database. And what that means is if the person does not have the paper on them, it doesn't matter because the information is entered into the police department database. So it can always be retrieved by the police if needed. From there on end, the case will progress. If the case is a felony case, which is a more serious charge, the next step is for the ADAs and the witnesses to go to a grand jury. And a grand jury is made up of the same people that go to a regular jury. They're citizens of Manhattan, and they come and they sit for a month or for 2 weeks, and all they do is listen to cases all day long. And their task is to determine whether or not they, the community, agrees that a crime has been committed. If they agree that a crime has been committed, they approve a piece of paper called an indictment, and that indictment is then passed on to a Supreme Court judge, and the case will continue. So their task is to determine if, as community members, they agree that a crime has been committed, and whether or not the case should continue as a felony to a Supreme Court judge. After that, the lawyers will argue about what evidence can or cannot be used at trial. When we finish filing papers about that, the cases will be adjourned for trial. Usually between the time of arrest and the time when the case can go to trial can be many, many months. During that period of time, it's important for the victim of the crime to be supported by whatever support system can be available to them. This is a time of great stress for an individual going through this process. Finally, if there is a trial, a jury will listen to the evidence in the case and decide if the defendant is guilty or not. If they decide the defendant is guilty, there will be a sentencing proceeding at which the victim can speak, where the ADA will speak, where the defendant has the opportunity to speak if they care to, and the defense counsel has the opportunity to speak, and a sentence will be handed down. At any time during this process, if the defendant wishes, they can plead guilty to the crime and they can end the process. Often when there is a conviction, either by plea or by the jury deciding so, a final order of protection is issued. That final order of protection will last several years after the case is concluded and will have instructions as to what kind of contact the defendant can have, if any, with the accused. With the victim, excuse me. Misdemeanors proceed the very same way, except that they don't go to grand jury. So one of the things that is important to understand is that in this process, especially as the case is progressing, we know that women are very vulnerable to pressure at this point in time. This is the time when community support is the most important. One statistic that I did not give you is that it takes on average 7 times before a victim of a crime is able to leave the person who is actually abusing them. That's 7 times. So that means that a person may initiate a proceeding and go back to the person who is abusing them. After the time when someone is able to bring up the courage to come forward, that is the time when the person needs the most support. From their community, from their family, from their friends, from the justice system, from everyone that is involved in the process. It is that time at which they are most vulnerable to regret, to feelings that they are compromising something in some way, that they are jeopardizing their family relationships. It is that period of time when they are most likely to go back to the individual that is causing the problem in the home. So support is a very, very important part of what we do here. And because support is such an important part, we have a unit called the Victim Assistance Unit, or the Witness Aid Services Unit, And I'm going to introduce Beverly to talk to you about what we do to support victims as they go through this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Janine. My name is Beverly Gilchrist, and it is an honor to serve as the Deputy Supervisor of our Witness Aid Services Unit of the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I've been in the office for 20 years as well, and our unit is dedicated to providing the additional support to our crime victims. So the assistant district attorneys prosecute the cases, and we are there to provide the additional support and counseling and social services in our unit that many domestic violence victims will need. District Attorney Vance and Special Victims Bureau Chief Audrey Moore are deeply committed to providing the highest quality of services to victims in New York City, New York County jails. They have raised the bar, and they have put together a team of specially trained professionals who are incredibly dedicated and sensitive to the needs of all the victims that come into our office. There are 33 of us, including victim advocates, case managers, and master's level social workers who provide counseling. Our services are available downtown here, actually in the building across the street, and some staff are staffed in this building as well, and also in our satellite office in the Northern Manhattan office.